Nobody declared war. There were no airstrikes, no missiles, no soldiers crossing any border. But make no mistake, what China did on Monday, June 22, 2026, is an act of economic warfare against the United States of America. And the fact that it got buried under Iran deal headlines and reflecting pool algae stories doesn't make it any less serious. Here's what actually happened. China's Commerce Ministry announced sanctions on 10 American military-related companies, blocking Chinese exporters from supplying dual-use items goods that have both civilian and military applications to those firms. The list is specific, and it's telling. Aviox in Simi Valley, California, Red Cat Holdings and Teal Drones, both in South Salt Lake, Utah, IMSAR in Springville, Utah. Jaya Robotics in Bristol, Rhode Island. Ball Aerospace and Technologies in Broomfield, Colorado. Oshkosh Defense in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. L3 Harris Maritime Services in Norfolk, Virginia. MP Materials in Las Vegas. And USA Rare Earth in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Al Jazeera, read that list again slowly, because it's not random. Drone manufacturers. Aerospace contractors. Rare earth mining companies. These aren't peripheral businesses. These are companies that make the weapons systems, the unmanned aerial vehicles, and the raw materials that power America's military capability. China didn't pick these companies by accident. China picked them because they're important. Because cutting them off from Chinese supply chains hurts. And that wasn't even the full picture. Separately, China's finance ministry announced that government agencies would be prohibited from purchasing products from 46 American companies, a list that reportedly includes subsidiaries of Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and General Dynamics. 46 companies. The biggest names in American defense. Banned from selling to the Chinese government. Let's be real about what this is. This is tit-for-tat retaliation. China calling it exactly what it is in its official statement, saying the move came in response to the U.S. government's egregious act of adding to its so-called Chinese military enterprise list and wrongful expansion of that list. The U.S. had added several major Chinese tech companies, including Alibaba and Baidu, to the Pentagon's roster of firms allegedly linked to China's military. China hit back. That's the cycle. That's been the cycle since 2018, when this trade war first erupted. One side acts, the other retaliates, both sides escalate, and the companies and workers caught in the middle pay the price. Al Jazeera, but here's what's different now, and why you should care about this even if you've never heard of Aviox or Jaya Robotics. The rare earth angle. MP Materials in Las Vegas and USA Rare Earth in Stillwater, Oklahoma, these aren't just defense contractors in the traditional sense. They're mining and processing companies working on rare earth elements. And rare earth elements are, without exaggeration, the most strategically critical materials in the modern world. They go into fighter jets, missiles, radar systems, electric vehicles, smartphones, wind turbines, essentially every advanced technology that runs modern civilization. For decades, China has dominated the global rare earth supply chain, controlling something like 60% of mining and an even higher percentage of processing capacity. This is not a new vulnerability. American military and intelligence officials have been warning about rare earth dependence on China for years. Years. And what did Washington do about it? Not enough. Not fast enough. And now, in 2026, we're watching China use that leverage in a targeted, precise way, not a blanket embargo, not a full economic decoupling, but a specific sanctions list that hits drone makers and rare earth companies and says, you need things we have, and we can make that painful. Here's the timeline that should make every American uncomfortable. In May 2026, Trump flew to Beijing. He sat down with Xi Jinping at a state dinner in the Great Hall of the People. with both countries' flags on prominent display. The administration called it a breakthrough. China's Commerce Ministry later said the American sanctions run counter to the consensus that Xi Jinping and Trump reached during Trump's visit to China in May. In other words, we shook hands, we made agreements, and then you sanctioned our tech companies anyway. And now we're sanctioning yours. Al Jazeera, you've heard Trump talk about, deals his entire political career. He wrote a book called The Art of the Deal. He built his brand on being the ultimate deal maker, and in May, he went to Beijing and reportedly struck a deal with Xi that was supposed to de-escalate the tech war between the two countries. Less than 2 months later, China is sanctioning American defense companies and banning its government from buying Lockheed Martin products. Either the deal was never real, or it fell apart faster than any of us were told. Either way, something went wrong, and nobody in Washington is giving the American people a straight answer about what it was. Let's talk about the drone angle specifically, because it matters in ways that connect directly to the Iran war we just fought. Several of the sanctioned companies are military drone makers: Red Cat Holdings, Teal Drones, Jaya Robotics. These are companies building the unmanned aerial vehicles that the U.S. military depends on for surveillance, targeting, and strike capability. During the Iran war, drones were everywhere: U.S. drones, Iranian drones, both sides using them in and around the Strait of Hormuz. Drone capability is not a peripheral military consideration anymore. It's central. And China just moved to cut off Chinese component supply chains to American drone companies. Al Jazeera now. Analysts will tell you the practical impact is limited. Many of these companies already have restricted access to the Chinese market and have been working on supply chain diversification for years. That's partially true. George Chen, partner for Greater China at the Asia Group, called it an unsurprising and proportionate response. And the fact that China's own statement allows companies to apply for export approval for goods genuinely necessary suggests they're not trying to blow up the relationship entirely, just signal displeasure and apply pressure. Axios but limited immediate impact and not a serious long-term threat are two completely different things. The immediate impact of these sanctions may be manageable. The long-term trajectory, where China systematically identifies American military dependencies and constructs leverage points over them, is a threat that deserves serious national attention. Not as background noise, not buried under Iran deal coverage, front and center. Because here's the bigger picture that nobody wants to say plainly. The United States is simultaneously managing a fragile peace deal with Iran, a relationship with Israel that's openly defying American diplomatic wishes, and a technology and defense Cold War with China that just got visibly hotter. These things don't exist in separate compartments. The rare earth companies on China's sanctions list are the same companies trying to reduce American dependence on Chinese materials for drones, for missiles, for the weapon systems that America would need if the relationship with China deteriorates further. Sanctioning them is China saying, "We see what you're trying to do. We're watching. And we can make it harder." And the 46-company government procurement ban Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics subsidiaries blocked from Chinese government contracts that's not just symbolic. China is the second largest economy in the world. Even with the existing tensions and restrictions, American defense companies have had business interests in China. Every time that relationship gets cut further, there are economic consequences that flow back to American workers, American investors, and American communities where those companies operate. Colorado has Ball Aerospace. Wisconsin has Oshkosh Defense. Virginia has L3 Harris. Nevada has MP Materials. Oklahoma has USA Rare Earth. These are real places with real jobs and real economic stakes. When China sanctions a company, it doesn't just affect a CEO's quarterly earnings call. It affects the supply chains, the contracts, the hiring decisions, and eventually the paychecks of people who've never thought about the US-China tech war once in their lives. Enough is enough on the idea that this is just a distant geopolitical chess match between two governments. It's not. It's an economic conflict that is quietly shaping what America can build, what America can defend itself with, and what American workers are manufacturing. And it's happening while the country's attention is on Iran and Versailles, wine receptions, and algae in a reflecting pool. Pay attention to this story. Not because war with China is imminent, it isn't, and nobody should pretend it is, but because economic wars have consequences that accumulate slowly and then hit all at once. We felt that with supply chains during COVID. We're feeling it with rare earth vulnerabilities now. And every escalation in this tit-for-tat sanctions cycle makes the next escalation more likely. Share this if you think Americans deserve to know what's actually happening in the US-China tech and defense war. Drop a comment. Which of these companies do you think is most vulnerable? And what should America be doing right now to reduce its dependence on Chinese supply chains? Because the time to ask those questions isn't after the next escalation. It's right now.